What's up, Broncos country? Who is the Denver Broncos Offensive Player of the Year? Myself and several others at Mile High Sports, we sat down, we talked about it, and we came up with our votes. We're going to share with you here on today's brand new episode of Good Morning Broncos. Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into a freshly brewed installment of G&B here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. Mile High Sports is every team, every day. And just a quick reminder, today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Superbook Sports. They're changing the game. You can win some money this season with Superbook Sports, the most trusted name in sports gambling, with a direct line to Las Vegas. And now when you use the promo code MileHigh, you score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Whether you win or lose, Superbook, they'll match your first bet up to $250 with promo code MileHigh. So download the Superbook Sports app, enter the promo code MileHigh, and you'll get $250 courtesy of Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. It's good to see you all here once again. Obviously, we did an episode after the Broncos season ended. There's been a lot of different things going on over the course of the last week. We had George Paton, Sean Payton, Greg Penner's end-of-the-year press conference, which we recapped in full, talked about how the door's still open here for Russell Wilson to potentially return in the year 2024. But, I mean, right now, everything's just speculation season. The new league year officially kicks off on March 13th. And so, in the meantime, there's probably not going to be a lot of action. There's probably not going to be a lot of conversation going on as to what the Broncos are actively doing. But here's what I can tell you the Broncos are doing here this week. Coaches, they returned to the building. They had last week off, minus Sean Payton, who had the end-of-the-year press conference. But coaches flew last week of having that time off. They were assigned the ability to write reports on their positions, right? So the players that they coach, individual position-specific reports, reviews on players, their development this season, and then the coaching staff, coordinators, brass, they're all going to meet, and they're going to talk about what the vision is for 2024. That stuff is going on this week in Dove Valley with coaches back in the building, so something to point out there. But one thing we did do here at Mile High Sports over the weekend at milehighsports.com, we're starting to do our end-of-the-season awards, where I asked several members of the Mile High Sports staff to give me their insight on some of the major awards. For example, as we'll go through, and I'll tell you some of the roundtable stuff: Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved Player of the Year. We'll get to the most promising rookie, the level of confidence that people have in Sean Payton, the direction of the Broncos, and their biggest need and quarterback questions going into the offseason. We'll get through a few here today. We'll go through Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Most Improved Player as voted on by the MHS staff. I think first off, let's start off with the Broncos Offensive Player of the Year. I asked myself, obviously myself, I didn't ask myself. I just shared my own thoughts there. I asked Rich Kurtzman, Doug Ottawil, Sean Drotar, and Lindsey Bebo, who are all staff members here at Mile High Sports, their thoughts on who they believe the Offensive Player of the Year was. And I think the overall consensus, Courtland Sutton kind of dominated the voting. Lindsey had selected Courtland. I selected Courtland. Rich also selected Courtland Sutton. I think it's pretty easy to see why when you look at production on the offensive side of the ball, 10 touchdowns on the year, didn't get any consideration really for any of the all-pro voting. I feel like if maybe Courtland would have surpassed over 1,000 yards, he probably would have gotten some stronger consideration. But there were guys like Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb had a terrific year. Justin Jefferson had a terrific year despite missing a handful of games due to being on injured reserve. It just goes to show how talented of a player he is. And so the wide receiver position, because there's so many in the NFL and there's 32 teams, you really have to stand out in order to get that recognition in the all-pro voting, not only just in the NFLPA side of things, but we're also talking about the Associated Press all-pro voting, which, a lot of that is skewed toward the East time zone or East Coast type of teams. A lot of the voters on the East Coast there, they don't watch a lot of the Mountain Time or, even the Pacific Time type of games, and a lot of these guys have a vote. They don't watch a lot of film, unfortunately. It's all based on, I'm going to look up stats, but stats don't always tell the full picture, right? And I think when you look at 10 touchdowns for Courtland, it definitely doesn't tell the full picture about the type of production that he had this season. So I think on top of his production, Courtland, you knew what you were getting with him. You always were going to get a circus catch. You're going to get, hey, if you throw it down deep, more than likely Courtland's going to come down with it. I mean, we can go back to the memorable play against the Buffalo Bills, the getting the 2 feet in on fourth down of all things, one of the most improbable catches in NFL Next Gen Stats history. he somehow made it, and that helped the Broncos beat the Buffalo Bills in Monday Night Football. Now, hey, the Bills are, they're going to the divisional round here in the playoffs. Denver beat some really good playoff teams in the regular season. We'll see if that can be motivation for them, if that can set things up here for 2024 here. I think we're going to look at some other guys here. Doug Ottewill, obviously one of the editors here at Mile High Sports, and he runs the magazine portion. Obviously one of the, guys who helped create the company. He has selected Russell Wilson as one of those guys. And I think overall, when we talk about where guys are at in terms of just production, I think Russ had a lot of areas of his game where he definitely could have been the offensive player of the year in terms of where Denver's offense was at. I mean, obviously, there's a small sample size with Jarrett Stidham coming in the last 2 games of the season. Didn't really light it up. Didn't really have a lot of production there. So Doug went with Russ. And then I think, some of the other conversations, too, that we're going to have, Sean Drotar, he selected Quinn Miners as the team's best offensive player of the year, which, look, I think you take away the skill player position. Yeah, I think Quinn Miners is probably the best player on the offense for Denver this past season. Obviously, their best lineman by far, getting a lot of recognition this season from people that watch the tape, that grind and see it. He's had a terrific jump around. He stayed healthy this season. It was good to see Big Quinn get some recognition here. Sean Drotar gives him the award, the nod for the offensive player of the year on his side of things. But now I think we got to take a look and jump at the defensive side of the ball. This was one where I think there was a tie collectively in terms of 2 players having the same amount of votes overall in our voting process here at MHS. And I think one of it is I went with a defensive back. And look, I think the easy thing would have been for me to go Patrick Surtain or Justin Simmons, right? I went with the guy who I felt like really had a huge impact on Denver's defensive turnaround this season. I went with Jaquan McMillan. Obviously for him, he had 2 interceptions. I think he had 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries as well. He had 51 tackles, but he had 7 tackles for a loss behind the line of scrimmage, which was impressive in and of itself, because you think about how important it is in today's age, especially when we see nickel defenses. You really have to be, if you're going to play inside the slot, you can't just be, a guy who covers. Like, you have to. That's a demand of the job, but you also have to be a damn good tackler. Jaquan was a great tackler here for the Broncos, and be able to get 7 tackles for a loss behind the line of scrimmage and really not see your first play time until about week 4 of the NFL season. Pretty impressive there, considering the string and the run, obviously, that Denver went on. He was a big catalyst behind it. Broncos safety Justin Simmons said that Jaquan was the team's defensive MVP, in his opinion, for what they were able to do this season. So I went with Jaquan McMillan. I'm not the only one that did that as well. Lindsey Bebo also went with Jaquan in this situation. So we were thinking very similar here. Sean Drotar here went with Justin Simmons. Said throughout the stats, when Simmons was on the field, the Broncos defense was good to occasionally excellent. When he wasn't, calling Denver's otherwise abysmal defense porous would have been a compliment. Simmons' supercomputer football brain and pitch-perfect technique make him one of the NFL's most elite safeties. And look, he's been one of those impact players, and you could definitely tell when Justin's on the field, Denver's defense is in a much better position. They're aligned. They communicate more. He is the guy who really makes sure that defense runs on the back end, and the communication, when it was really bad, when he was injured, when he was not out there on the field, you could definitely tell things were off there with Denver's defense. So Justin Simmons gets the nod there. And then Doug Ottewill and Rich Kurtzman, they had the similar pick here. They went with inside linebacker Alex Singleton, who obviously led the team in tackles. He set a new NFL record with 13 games this past season of 10-plus tackles. I mean, for him, he's everywhere. And I know there's a conversation going on Twitter, on social media, I think, about the Broncos inside linebacker thing. A lot of people say, oh, he's overrated. He makes tackles down the field. Well, here's the reality. Of course, he makes tackles downfield because the Broncos run defense, and people always think it's just on the inside linebackers why the run defense isn't good. Denver's run defense, and it made it harder. If you've ever played defense or if you've played inside linebacker, you know what I'm saying here. You know exactly what I'm about to bring up. If your defensive line is not creating penetration, or they're just easily getting double teamed and pinned down, it allows the guy who's on the outside shoulder of a double team to attack down with his inside hand and to move up to the play side linebacker, which then makes it like, as a linebacker, now you have to read and see which way the running back's going if your defensive line is opening up your holes and your gaps for you to be able to fill in your run fits. That's why we've seen the Broncos run defense get gashed a little bit. Alex Singleton, very instinctual. Josie Jewell, very instinctual. Both these guys are very good inside linebackers, and I think Alex Singleton definitely has a legitimate case to be the defensive player of the year in our voting here. But there was a tie between Jaquan McMillan and Alex Singleton overall. We want to know, if you had to vote on it, who would you choose as the Broncos Defensive Player of the Year? And that's going to lead us into our third category in our voting. We'll have more obviously going forward here. Which Broncos took the biggest stride in 2023? I think this is a very, very important question to ask here. And in the context of it, we look at this as the most improved player from 2022 to 2023. I went with Lloyd Cushenberry, and I think Sean Drotar also went with Lloyd Cushenberry in the voting process here. And I think for Lloyd, you look at him since he was drafted his rookie season, there was a lot of excitement. The expectations were high for him. Rookie season, he struggled. He got out physicaled in a lot of those situations. A lot of teams would place a nose tackle directly in a zero tech or a one tech, and they would slant across his face and they'd blitz a linebacker inside the A gap. And it led to a lot of internal pressure. It led to a lot of sacks on quarterbacks there. And he struggled there after playing in a very high octane offense at LSU, snapping to Joe Burrow. So it was an adjustment, right? So the next season, the Broncos, they bring in somebody to compete in training camp. He wins the starting job. Same exact thing next year in 2022. They bring somebody in. He wins the starting job. Obviously played 8 games, suffered the groin injury, and then didn't play the rest of the season because of that, which was a little odd because toward the end of the season, he could have played. The team just decided to hold him out there. And then obviously in 2023, another offensive scheme for Cush. And he had his best season yet as a pro. He got noticeably bigger, stronger, and still maintained his athleticism, was much better in the run blocking department. His pass protection on the interior was drastically better as well. He had his best season yet as a pro. And I think it's a great reminder here for a guy like Lloyd Cushenberry to kind of pinpoint that, hey, you know what? You draft a guy in round 2 or 3, right, at the offensive line position. They may not always click right away, right? It may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years. But I think it's important to highlight, like, this is why development is important. And, right, I think you can develop a guy. And what the Broncos did with Cush by bringing in competition every single year, it made him better. It made him elevate his game. And obviously he took his preparation to the next level. You have to do that. And I think that's the emphasis that you have on player development. I think the expectation has been so skewed. And look, obviously expectations in the National Football League are always high for everybody. But the thing is, you have to bring in guys, and you cannot expect that they're going to just shine and be a star right away. It may take a couple of years, but are you as a coaching staff, are you as a front office or a scouting department, are you patient enough to do that, right? And I think you'll know internally. And look, obviously the Broncos, they've known this a long time. There are a lot of things that Cush possesses in terms of traits, leadership, athletic ability, and obviously the smarts up here in the brain, where they knew that, hey, this guy can piece it together. It's just going to take a little bit more time. And that's exactly what we saw in 2023. The problem now is he's set to become an unrestricted free agent in 2024. Does Denver bring him back? Or do they move to Alex Forsythe, who last week George Payton told us they view him as a starting center in the NFL? So a lot of interesting questions coming up here for the status of Lloyd Cushenberry. Doug Ottewell, he selected Russell Wilson as the most improved player, which, look, I think there is a valid argument to that. When you look at 2022 to 2023, who took a bigger jump production-wise and efficiency than Russell Wilson, right? Russ, obviously, things didn't end well this season for him. And obviously we talk about the benching, missing the final 2 games. I think there's a valid argument here for Russ to be the most improved player. I think, a good portion of Broncos country would even say that themselves outside of Lloyd Cushenberry. So it's a good selection there. Rich Kurtzman selected Jaquan McMillan, obviously the Broncos nickel cornerback. Said the second-year cornerback was special this season in a reserve role that became a starting spot. He enjoyed 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 passes defensed. He's going to be good for years to come, and Denver's got him right now in a very, very good spot at the nickel. He is a guy who can play the pass. He can play the run really well, as we talked about in the Defensive Player of the Year voting, in which I selected Jaquan McMillan alongside Lindsey Bebo. I think this is a good selection as well. So Broncos country, we want to hear from you. Who do you believe is the most improved player from 2022 to 2023? Let us know down below here as you're watching on Good Morning Broncos here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. We'll continue the voting as we go about in the next couple of days here on GMB. Our schedule is going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the foreseeable future. And then once the Super Bowl is kind of gone and past, we'll start adjusting shows a little bit in terms of how often we do them. We'll have some off-season content for you as well here on MHS's YouTube page. Broncos country, appreciate you so much for tuning in.
What's up, guys? Kim Becker here with Mile High Sports. Make sure you guys are following us on social media so that you never miss a Mile High Sports daily. Monday through Friday morning, we'll post a video hosted by me catching you up on everything you need to know when it comes to sports right here in the Mile High State. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you name it, we're there, and we've got you covered for everything Colorado sports.